My name is Kane, and today I will not only be reviewing the film Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but I'll also be delving into the genre conventions, the narrative, and the representation of the film. So, what is Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Well, it's a live action slash animated film that mixes the two very different film styles to create a unique and one of a kind film. Not only was it one of the first movies to do this, but it did it amazingly, better than films that have done it many years later, for example Space Jam. Who Framed Roger Rabbit takes place in 1942 in LA, where Eddie Valiant, a cartoon-hating detective played by Bob Hoskins, is put on a case of a murder and ends up helping the cartoons. Now, this may sound like a normal detective film, but what this film does is hides many secret messages about segregation and racism. Now, what are the positives of this film? Well, it mixes live action with drawn cartoons. What more could you want? But not only that, it's probably one of the only times you'll ever see Warner Bros. Characters, like Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny, playing alongside Disney characters like Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse. Now, the only way they could do this within the film is if both Disney and Warner Bros. Characters had the exact same screen time. For example, whenever there was a Warner Bros. Character on screen, a Disney character would also have to be on screen. Now, they did this so that neither one of them could get more screen time than the other, and overall it turned out amazing and worked very well, especially with the piano scene between Daffy and Donald Duck. Now, like with every film, there will be negatives, and there is within this. For example, not all the animation is perfect. There are many scenes within the film where you can see gaps between the live action and the animated, but then again, for a film created in 1988, it still does very well. Now, also with this film, it actually deals with a lot of dark subjects. Some may find too dark for a so-called children's film. I think we can say we hated the shoe melting scene. And it deals with subjects like racism, segregation and adultery, which some may find too dark for a family film. So, it's time to delve a bit deeper into the film itself and what makes it up. So what are genre conventions? Well, they're the similarities over a media product. For example, how superheroes always wear a costume. It's something that's conventional. So, you may ask, how does this film do it? Well, actually, the whole film does it throughout. For example, the scene right at the beginning with the baby. How many films have you seen where someone is in charge of a baby and something goes wrong? It's almost a cliche of cartoons. Not only that, but the end of the scene where the fridge falls on top of Roger and the birds appear around his head, but the scene's cut because they should have been stars. This again is something that you see all over cartoons, where they hit their head and stars appear around them. All throughout this film, it's been used like this. Now, why do they do it? It's to bring to life the fact that even though it's a live action film, it's still a cartoon, and it does it brilliantly. Now, what type of audience does this film have? Well, because it's a cartoon-based film, you would say it's for children, but the dark aspects of murder, racism, segregation, and adultery would suggest differently. So overall, the film's audience is very mainstream, as it doesn't actually point towards one particular audience, but instead, its main aim was to create something different and new by mixing action and animation. It's mainly aimed at people who love animated comedies and want to see something new. So, the narrative of the film is very straightforward and very linear based way of telling a story. Like a book, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But it works for this type of film. It doesn't need to change it up. It has a particular storyline which it follows, and it does it well. It has climaxes, it has twists, but it sticks to a very straightforward way of telling a story. Now, this story does have a single strand effect, as it's about Roger and it's his story. However, Eddie Valiant plays a massive role and could be classed as the main character, as he actually has more screen time than any other character throughout the film. Okay, so now I think we can all say we know a little bit more about this film. Well, we've not got to the main part yet, which is representation, which is a massive part of this film. As I've mentioned throughout this review already, this film has many dark aspects that run alongside the main storyline. This film is based on the book Who Censored Roger Rabbit, which was published in 1981, and was a dark story about segregation between humans and cartoons. And the film carries on doing this, maybe not in such an obvious way, but there are many indications that show racism and segregation. For example, one of the main plots of the film is the developer wanting to tear down Toontown to create a freeway for the humans. This is almost a historical fact because in the 1940s in LA, there were two parts of town, one for white people and one for coloured. They even had separate sinks and bathrooms for each to use, and in 1940 a developer wanted to tear through the coloured part of town to create a freeway for the rich and wealthy. just like in Roger Rabbit. Also, a massive indication of segregation and racism is the Ink and Paint Club, which is a club in the film Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where only cartoons perform and serve, and only humans watch. This is exactly the same as in 1942, the Cotton Club only allowed coloured people to perform and serve, and only allowed white people to watch. So as you can see, this film actually touches a lot of dark subjects. Not only that, but it also has an interesting way of seeing women. Cartoons overall tend to use stereotypes to help us connect with the cartoon. But within Who Framed Roger Rabbit, they created a character which many of us find hard to forget. Her name is Jessica Rabbit, an iconic female character who we meet in the Ink and Paint Club as a performer. Now, this character alone can put many women off this film, as overall she's a very offensive character, making an impossible impression on young girls with her figure. However, in my opinion, this film is amazing, a revolution in live action / animation. And yes, it does have some very dark and questionable scenes, but overall has an in-depth storyline with rememberable characters, and one of the only times you'll ever see Warner Bros. And Disney in the same film together. And that's to be one of my favourite films of all time. And this can all be backed up with the way it gives such a powerful message of racism and segregation, and the way it uses genre conventions to show it's still a family love cartoon. Thank you.